feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We are brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Tuesday morning. It's March 18th after the Wolves' overtime loss to the Indiana Pacers. I have Britt, Robson with me here today. That Pacers game will be probably most of our conversation today. Certainly the lead of it. We'll also talk about some bigger picture things over the last few weeks. Britt wrote a cool Tim Connelly feature. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the episode, preview that a little bit. And yeah, man, we're 70 games in. We don't got that many pods left this season. It's crazy. It's great. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, I thought it was a really enjoyable game if you didn't care about who won or who lost, just in terms of a really undermanned team in Indiana, really busted its ass for 53 minutes and overcoming an amazing amount. They didn't have their top four scorers in the to start, and then they lost their fifth and sixth scorers, one through ejection, one through fouling out. And so they had to rely on a couple of bigs who were career 35% three-point shooters to just rain hell on them in the overtime. There was kind of a karmic victory because Indiana deserved to win that game. They played harder. They played with more discipline. They played with more intelligence. And the only thing they didn't have was more skill.
It's just kind of over this winning streak. Finch has been asked pregame. I know you've been there a handful of times, just kind of about, sustaining it and how they're playing and all those things. And what the line Finch keeps using is, who is this game more important to? Right. And he's saying that before the Orlando game or, against some of the Utah game, and just being like, it's obviously, it should obviously be more important to us, so we should take care of business. And they did for the 8-game winning streak. It did feel last night like the game was more important to Indiana. And not that the Wolves, didn't play hard. I think after they kind of got past their first half slogging, it was important to them too. But yeah, I was just rewatching the fourth quarter and overtime before we started here, and it's like it was clear it mattered to the Wolves at the end of that game. Right. It mattered just as much, if not more, to TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin and those guys as well. And yeah, in a back-to-back, it's tough to catch an opponent like that. But ultimately, Indiana played harder, executed, I think, a smarter, more effective game plan in that one. And you just kind of watch the energy of it, and particularly, again, the execution down the stretch. It was just it was Indiana's game.
And the fact of the matter is Indiana does have a tremendous amount to play for. They are neck and neck with the Bucks for the number 4 seed, which gives you home court advantage in the playoffs, which is huge.
Yeah, good point.
And so, and they have, I think I have an upcoming game against the Bucks, and not for nothing, they play the Wolves after these 2 games coming up against the Pels. So that'll be an interesting rematch.
Let's start with clutch time. I want to go there. What did you think was missing in the clutch from the Wolves? Because we kind of got 2 spins at it, right?
Decision making and shot selection. Very clear. I mean, this is a broken record to some extent. Ant has actually done a very good job recently, and some of it is, because of this win streak. But the team has been moving the ball and making quick decisions and executing its half-court offense and getting into its half-court offense more rapidly. There's been all kinds of great signs of a high-quality offense, and that can happen if Ant emerges as too much of a dominant force in terms of holding the ball, shooting the ball, whatever. And this was yet another example. There have been a full handful of examples this year where Ant's tunnel vision on shooting, especially from deep, especially in unwise situations, has hurt this team, and especially in clutch time. I mean, I pulled some stats. I too watched pretty much what you watched, the fourth quarter and overtime. Here are Ant's last 5 3-point shots. Okay.
Yep.
7:38 to go in the fourth quarter. The Wolves up 4, 101-97 from the left slot with 13 on the clock. 5:58, Wolves up 2, 101-99 from the left slot, 10 on the clock. Missed shot. All these are 3-point misses. 2:48 to go in the game. Wolves up 2, 110-108. This was, I think, probably the stupidest shot he tried. The Wolves were up 2 points. There was 10 on the clock. There was 2:48 to go in the game. If you get yourself a good look and get even 2 points to make it a 4-point game there, that's really helpful. And then the one that ended the regulation, pretty much no time left on the clock. Again, left slot. All of these shots are left slot or left right above the break. And then in overtime, another really, really dumb shot. Probably actually dumber than the 2:48 one. 44 seconds left to go in overtime. The Wolves are up to 128-126. 10 on the clock. He shoots a shot from the left slot, and it doesn't. So 4 shots from the left slot, 1 shot from the left, a little bit above the break. All of them with the exception of the the regulation decider. 13, 10, 10, and 10 on the clock. You're in the half court. You have the guy with the ball. The team is spread on every single one of those occasions. There is no person in the middle of the floor. They are ringed around. It's a 5-out situation. And if somebody can't move without the ball and get open while Anthony Edwards is dribbling on the 3-point arc, then this team is incredibly inept offensively. And what we have seen from the previous 8 wins was they are not inept offensively, that it is a formula for winning. And
let me interject right there.
Yeah.
Because I think the 5-out part of it is important. And it's related to why I don't think there was as much movement or cutting through there. It's because when it was 5-out and you're Jaden McDaniels in the corner or Naz Reid in the opposite slot, you're looking at it and you're like, all right, Ant has a guy on him who can't really contain him with the ball. And then the rim protectors like Tony Bradley or Obi, it wasn't really that. So I think they were trying to leave the space for Ant to be able to attack, because the attack was there the entire night. What I'm struggling with reflecting on it is like, yeah, I'm watching every single one of those shots. And at the time I'm like, oh my God, there's an opportunity to go to the basket. He does still end the game with 20 free throws attempts.
Yes.
And so I don't know exactly what to do with it. I echo what you're saying. My absolute feeling is Ant needed to get down to the basket. That was there more often, but he did get to the line 20 times. So what should be the expectation there? Go again. I know Jace kind of asked Finch about that afterwards, and it was like, if it's the right thing to do it a 7th time, do you do it a 7th time? And Finch said yes. It's just I could come on here and would have come on here to be a lot harder about those 3-point shot selection if I can't look at the free throw column in that game and see 20 free throw attempts. I don't know exactly what to do with that.
Oh, I do. You have 23 throws. You make 19 of them. You're 1 of 11 from 3. What do you do with a game on the line?
Yeah. Okay. I get it. But what I'm telling you, what he was thinking and what he was doing is me going downhill and going to the basket. I'm going to get hit. I'm going to drive into a crowd. I'm sick of getting these double teams. I mean, this is what the thought process in his head is. And I mean, there was a couple of times where he just took the step back there where there was totally the lane that he just knew another guy was going to come in and foul him. That's what's going on in Ant's head. I agree. It's a better move to go there, but we can't pretend that those 2 options are equal energy options. Okay,
well, who's to say? And Mike Conley is actually one to say, because he said the exact opposite should happen. Why is Ant's only options driving into 3 people or shooting from 3 on a night when he can't shoot? Why not move the ball around? Are there Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, Mike Conley, Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle? These people cannot somehow beat a skeleton squad of Indiana Pacers, even though they're playing really hard.
That's not what I'm saying.
I know,
I'm saying they were giving him the space.
What I'm saying is move the ball, move without the ball, and make quick decisions in the half court. Pretend the game is 6 minutes to go in the third quarter. Play the goddamn game rather than the score and the situation. Why is it that all of a sudden your superstar needs to be hero ball? I mean, we talked about this. You and I have talked about this.
Right.
Chris Finch has talked about this when it's not in a situation to criticize that. In fact, what he says is, if you say, why have you been playing better XXX? We've stopped doing as many hero ball threes. We started to move the ball. Well, that didn't happen. That didn't happen when it mattered most. And I think the reason is because all night long, the Wolves couldn't shake the idea that they were going to beat a bunch of scrubs.
Facts. Yep.
So they thought, all right, Ant will just do this because Ant can do this against these guys. Or they just didn't utilize every arrow in their arsenal because they didn't think they needed to. And they underestimated the gumption and resilience of an opponent that had shown all game that they were going to be resilient. I mean, it just when the Wolves were up 5 with less than a minute to play, and all of a sudden it's a tie game, that should have said, "All right, get ready for overtime, pals." I mean, it was a. First of all, I do want to cop to what you said in the beginning, which is that the Wolves played hard in the second half. They did. They played hard. And they played hard trying to stop Indiana on defense. In fact, in some ways, a little too hard. They played chaotically because they suddenly decided it was a physical slugfest kind of game, and they were going to, be as aggressive as the Pacers were. And consequently, McConnell was able to break them down off the dribble, not because TJ McConnell is such a incredible John Stockton-like figure or a great shooter, but because his dribbling, he understood that his dribbling connected more people to him over and over again. And to be fair to the Wolves, an outlet pass to Obi Toppin or Thomas Bryant for 3 doesn't seem like a bad way to play defense. And yet those guys, I mean, they were 5 for 6 from 3-point territory in overtime. Bryant was 4 for 4. I mean, Toppin was 4 for 4 and Bryant was 1 for 2. The center and the power forward destroyed them from deep, and McConnell had assists on almost all of them. He wound up with 13 assists. Toppin had 5 of his 7 threes in the fourth quarter in overtime, 4 of them in overtime. It's just,
Yeah. I just think with the Ant part of it, there needs to be, it just seemed to be like a disconnect between what he was going to do versus what his maybe teammates thought he was going to do in those spots. And I think some of that is like communication and understanding. And I think, again, going through Ant's head, if I hit one of these Hail Mary threes that you're talking about from the shot selection standpoint, which I agree were great shot selection shots, he's thinking, if I hit that Hail Mary right there, this one's over. And to be fair, that's happened in plenty of games this season when he has done that. It's just tough when you look at it and you hit pause, 3 seconds before he chooses to take that shot, that the lane was there, open to the basket, and he only situationally chose to take it.
I understand your position, but I reiterate, he went into that fourth quarter 1 for 6 from 3-point territory. His only made 3 was like on one of the first 2 or 3 possessions of the second half. And he had 5 shots. 4 of those 5 shots occurred when there was 10 seconds left on the shot clock in the half court. They were already in the half court. 10 seconds already being in the half court is almost like somebody bringing the ball up against moderate pressure and initiating the offense.
I'm not arguing with you of what he should do. I'm making the point of this is what Ant does do.
Right.
This is what Ant does do at the end of games. He didn't run the play at the end of regulation. He went rogue. That's happened at the final play of games numerous times this season. So it becomes this question of, is Ant going to do things differently? And do you, as a coach and the players around him, anticipate him to do things differently? Or do you try to fit in to how Ant is going to choose to play? Because Ant very consistently is going to choose this way to play from a shot selection standpoint. I think from an energy and physicality preservation standpoint. The bigger question I have is, what does this look like when it's in the playoffs? Does he let go of that energy preservation and make the right play to go to the basket and get hit and get to the free throw line again and again and again? And I think the answer to that is probably yes, but I don't know. He has a much different habit of what his shot selection is now than previous playoffs, where he's become much more of a 3-point shooter. I just think there's a little bit of disconnect of how to play with Anthony Edwards when Anthony Edwards isn't hitting his threes at a high clip as he wasn't last night.
Exactly. And I think that has to be a recognition by Ant and his teammates. Don't go 5 out and stand there and watch. And many times, actually, I think in 2 or 3 of those 5 I'm talking about, at least 2 or 3, he waited for a pick and used the pick going left. He loves to use the pick going left far more than he, going right. And so it is one of those situations where if you want to make sure that he doesn't hit a 3 on a high pick and roll. Mm-hmm. So you are riding, you may be going under the screen a little bit, but you're blitzing. They blitz the pick and roll all night. And so you don't have a situation when you're boxed into that left slot that he loves to shoot from right in front of the bench when they're on the Wolves side of the court. That is just, it's not a high percentage shot anyway. And it is a shot. He has hit some big shots from there, and he remembers those. He does not remember the greater number of shots he misses from there. Mm-hmm. And again, it just comes down to a player reverting to old habits that are injurious to the team, and nobody really, from the coaching staff to the teammates to anybody, just basically stepping in and saying, hey, I know Finch called a 2-point play for Ant out of a timeout simply to get him to stop shooting those threes. But you have to do something. The ball, Mike Conley was like a plus 24 last night in a 2-point loss. Having Mike Conley with the ball rather than Ant in certain situations might have helped. I mean, I really don't know, because at the end of the day, he's your superstar. He's your straw, whatever you want to call it. And if he thinks this is the best way to win the game, you pretty much have to give him his head. They've won 8 in a row. Now there may be a retrenchment. Now there may be a thing where they'll get together today and they'll look things over and they'll see the film, and Ann will say, all right, I got a little bit, I'll do better next time. We've heard that a number of times, and sometimes it happens. So anyway, I do think there is another part of this game, and that is that Julius Randle in particular, after having just a fantastic run since the injury, coming back from the injury, just was terrible in that first half. Dante DiVincenzo was terrible, mostly because he missed open threes that he's usually been making. But I do think that first half was, that was the first words out of Finch's mouth, and very obvious. I tweeted it, you probably tweeted it, that they lost the game in the first half,
I want to talk about the rest of those things. I have a clip from Conley about the clutch time as well, but let's grab our first break here first, and to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. We tell you about Falling Knife all the time for Wolves games. A lot of Wolves fans are there watching the games on the projection screens with the TV on. The added thing this week is they're going to be open early for March Madness. So you can head to the tap room early, find a spot, settle in for hours and hours and hours of college basketball at Falling Knife. If you'd like to do that, again, all week for the tournament, they will be open, and that's in addition to all of the Wolves games that they're having fans watch the games at Falling Knife. Falling Knife is the Wolves bar in Minneapolis, but put it on your radar as a place to go for March Madness as well. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Just kind of looking at the setup for today's slate of games. The Warriors play the Bucks. I was thinking I might watch that one. It's looking at all right. If Giannis plays, maybe Draymond's on him. Let's go less than on his 6.5 rebounds. Steph Curry, his more or less than on points was 24.5. It's like, okay, take that. And then they have they're going to have some free squares this week. They have Johnny Broom from Auburn. If he scores a point, that's kind of their free square, more or less than 0.5 points in that game. Take that one there. So if all three of those hit, with one of them being a free square, that pays 5-1. Again, you can just play for $5. But I think this week during March Madness, when you're going to be watching the games and you start to get a feel for who the players are and what they do, and you want to put something on it, it's a fun way to do it. Again, you can always just play for $5. That's at prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. If you don't have an account, you want to make one for March Madness, sign up. It's really fun. Use the promo code Dane, and your account will be credited with a $50 sign up bonus when you make your first $5 lineup. That's prizepicks.com or on the Prize Picks app. To wrap up the clutch time thing, Britt, I asked Mike Conley just about the clutch and what this team didn't do last night and what they just need to kind of get better on, or if they can get better on that before the playoffs. Here's Conley.
I think was missing just in kind of clutch time execution and the regulation of the county.
Really, I think it's just us trusting what we're doing, as a whole, Ant trusting the play, us running the play as fast as we can or as hard as we can, executing. When we not all five on the same page, you can get scrambled. You get guys running into the corners, and you got people running into each other. You maybe get turnovers or bad looks, and that's not all on coach. It's not all on a play. It's on the players out there to be able to execute and do it to the best of our ability, and we just didn't do it when we needed to.
Does it feel like it's been a struggle in the games this season? Does it feel like you're a few small adjustments away from getting there, or how much further do you need to get to come playoff time?
Yeah, we're right there. If we there's sometimes we just make the wrong decision on a play that is for the better part, the right play. We just got to make the right pass, or what I'm saying. It's like small things that turn out to be a big issue for that moment, and we just got to continue to work on it. Continue to watch that film. Film's going to be big because we're going to be in these situations in playoffs, and all the big games we got coming up. We have to be able to execute. We have to be able to make the right reads at the right time, and that's just on us as players.
What is your confidence, Britt, that come the playoffs in a playoff series, that their execution late in games will be better or a lot better than it has been in close games and fourth quarters during the regular season?
I think a lot of it depends on the opponent, quite frankly.
Okay.
I think that when they're facing pressure, when a team is a team that gets two on the ball easily, or is a team that is a disciplined defensive team that is also aggressive. I think the Wolves, the easy answer is that the Wolves have a tendency to try to fight through, to not take what the game gives them when they're like, you see Randall, you see Ant, you see Randall actually does, when he's double teamed, do a decent job of kicking out, but it's usually a last minute kick out. It's late in the clock when he's done doing that kind of thing. But they don't, when they're really on their game, they do a lot of preemptive stuff that prevents doubles, that prevents people from bottling them up. And I think that is a mindset that Connelly is talking about. When to pass, how to pass, quick decisions and quick passes. I asked Finch the other day before the game, there's an interesting relationship between you. The quicker decisions you guys make, the fewer turnovers you have. That seems counterintuitive to me. And I asked if that was characteristic of the team, or do you think that's a general truth? And he thinks it's a general truth. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll agree with him, but I can tell you it's definitely something that the Wolves, if they don't think as much about how to attack what's in front of them and just immediately notice that the odds are not great for what's in front of them and get off the ball, that's when they are a much, much better offense. Now, in the heat of the playoffs, when there's more pressure and there's more of a desire to be the deciding guy, particularly with guys with, Ant and Randall's profile that are used to taking on things that are ISO-heavy players in their minds, if not their actions, then I do think there's a real worry there that weakness will be exploited. But I think if they play their game and they play preemptively, meaning always moving, just following Finch's precepts, it's been very, very obvious that this team this year, one of the encouraging things about these last 2 months of the season has been that they have the talent and the proclivity to move without the ball, move the ball, and do it quickly. That is how this team will succeed. And yeah, when Ant's on a heater, maybe, basically wedge that in, of course, whether it's from deep or inside, or if Randall's got his man, emphasize matchups that are working. But in general, follow what needs to. Indiana last night, they're going to Obi Toppin over and over again, not because Obi Toppin is like the guy, it's because it was the right play most of the time. No. And so what we're really talking about is court IQ and court awareness. And I think Julius Randle is very good at that. I think Ant is inconsistent at that, but when he is good at it, he is very good at it. When he isn't, it's very obvious. Connelly, I think either just before or just after he answered your question, which I thought was great, by the way, he said something about we need to grow into it. You remember that line where he said, we'll grow into it. What he was talking about there was taking the burden off Ant. Can we grow into taking the burden off Ant? Well, that's a nice way of saying, can Ant grow into not having the burden as much on him? Right. Because, it is a both ways situation. But I agree with Connelly. I think the Wolves are capable of doing it, not only against Cupcakes, but in the, crucible of the playoffs. But I also think that if you were to ask me what is probably the biggest way that they will blow a winnable game in the postseason, it would be, to me, shot selection in the half court in crunch time.
What if we said that a year ago?
Yes, probably.
See, that's the part that I was kind of talking with Jace about this after the game last night, and we both kind of came back to, I don't know, I would need to go back and watch and look or think about what that team looked like in those spots. It's just, it is a different team, obviously.
And right? The reason, I don't mean to interrupt you, but the reason is they had the number one defense in the NBA last year. And this year they're like down toward the bottom of the top 10.
Yeah, the defense was a big part of their clutch gene last season. And yeah, it's a reminder of a way in which this team is different. Obviously from a personnel standpoint. I do go back to the idea that Ant is different too. Ant has a different shot selection this year than he has in
Good
the
point.
previous
Yep.
years of his career. He has a rising star. He's better than he was too, so there's just these variables are a little bit different. And so, part of me goes, well, Ant, every time he's been in the playoffs has largely been awesome, and
Right.
so why should that not be my assumption for what it will be in the playoffs, that he will just overcome pretty much whatever it is that they throw at him? And the reason he wouldn't is that the variables are a little bit different. And I don't know, maybe it's just one of those things where you just got to see, like, when the money's really on the line, like, how are they going to perform? Because if we go off of how they performed in these situations during this regular season, when this team has been different iterations, it's largely been ineffective in clutch time. And a lot of, just when I asked Randall about it after the game, he's just like, we're just not playing smart basketball in these times. And so why should I, in the first round playoff series, enter that series with the presumption that they will be playing smarter basketball, that they will be playing better crunch time basketball? The only answer to that is that I've seen it in the playoffs before. I just don't know how relevant that is, given that this is on a new team with different personnel that plays stylistically different than they did in previous seasons.
But I would also argue, and admittedly, the caliber of the opposition is an argument against this, but they have been playing smart basketball. I mean, they have been sharing the ball. And yes, you're right. The stakes are lower. There's a margin for error that's much greater. And maybe that margin of error makes them relax into doing the right thing rather than being pressured into, we got to do this now. We got to score. I still think they're immature, but I also think that there has been growth in terms of recently. I think the fact that both DiVincenzo and let's face it, and I'm going to take myself out of the point I'm trying to make, but I do want to emphasize that when you're making your threes as regularly as the Wolves are, that all decisions are pretty easy.
Yeah.
A lot was made of the fact that Ant learned so much from Steph Curry through the Olympics and so on and so forth, and KD or whatever. And clearly, I think his appreciation for the value of three-point shooting was gleaned from that and caused him to do a lot of work. What would really unlock this Wolves team right now is if Ant checked out what Curry does off the ball, particularly his cuts, because Golden State has always, almost since Curry came into the league, because of Curry's offense and because of the personnel they have, led the NBA in cutting practically, in points off cuts. And Curry, who is the point guard of the team, he isn't even, Ant's the combo guard. Curry is the point guard. He's theoretically the guy who leads the team in assists. Well, he cuts to the basket at big times. You see him cutting to the basket in the middle of fourth quarters in playoff games all the time. And he's open. And he's open. And the reason he's open is because he keeps moving, and also because he has such gravity that if he keeps moving, teams have to figure out how many people are following him and who it is, because they're in the midst of maybe doubling him, or as he moves, do I get off my man to follow Curry? Meanwhile, the guy following Curry says, Well, I was so excited about Steph Curry making cuts that I swung my arm into my microphone and apparently hit the mute button. But right. Now that that's taken care of, the greater point just being that there are levels to Ant's game off the ball that are severely untapped. And
it's the two on the ball thing is just like that. If they put two, you give it away, and then you cut. That, like, and just for listeners, like, next time you watch a Warriors game, like, Steph faces that a lot. Watch what Steph does in those moments following getting off the ball once they put two on it. And to be fair to Ant, it's gotten better. It has gotten better in those situations. I think last night he was sick of it. I think he got, and it's one of those things where you can't make them stop double teaming you, right? I remember asking Finch, it's like, we can't ask them how we want them to guard us. But it's just that it's recognizing what it is and having different, weapons in the game to be able to
but I think it also needs to be cuts from to the basket. Very rarely do you see Ant cycle through, and I think that's one of the things that Curry does constantly. Curry spends so much time moving through the paint, and Ant does not do that nearly enough because Ant wants the ball, is looking for the ball the entire time. And what Curry is doing sometimes is just moving, knowing that his movement, the gravity of his movement, is furthering the offense in other places. And Ant hasn't gotten to that global understanding that if I'm moving, things are going on without me that are positive things. And by the time I'm through cycling through and I'm back out into a slot someplace, the chessboard has been rearranged, and now we can go. That type of thinking, he's too busy being in the moment to do that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, so I think it then becomes a question of what do you do in the meantime while he's figuring that out, right? And I mean, in what you're kind of like suggesting, that if you do want to use him more as an off-ball cutter, well, then he's got to be off-ball in the first place. And, so what on-ball option can you have that isn't as that much worse than Ant, so you get the profit of, you still get the overall profit from it? And is that more Julius? Is that Mike running more sets? I mean, I think if Rudy doesn't get ejected in that game, he's in the game for the clutch time of the fourth clutch time of OT. That's a lot of screening that didn't happen. The screens that were being set in the fourth quarter and overtime were always the kinds of screens that when Rudy screens somebody, it's very, very hard to get two on the ball quickly. Yeah, that's a good
after
point.
that. And so, in fact, they were blitzing it so hard when Rudy was out there. Yeah. And I think they were doing it because they knew they had to do. It's like you're like literally a blitz in football. You're want to overwhelm the offensive line.
Right.
And Rudy is like the equivalent of the offensive line with his screens because he takes out a man. So anyway, it's just.
Yeah, and then that goes the other way too, because it was the first quarter of the game they were blitzing it when Rudy was setting screens, and then Ant's trying to get it to Rudy in the pocket, and Rudy's not catching it, and so turnovers there. So I'm not saying that's a perfect option either. Obviously, there's flaws in it. The biggest one for Rudy last night, what was there consistently, and I would even like to have seen like Nas or somebody. I think if they would have put somebody in the dunker spot. I know, like I love when the Wolves play 5 out, but specific to Indiana, because Ant could take whoever it was, right, off the dribble. Whoever was guarding him last night, they didn't have a matchup for him, and then he goes downhill. And now it becomes the big rotates over, and I think this is like the best thing that Ant could do is in the midst of his drives, then he has the lob to Rudy or whoever in the dunker spot, because that is the getting downhill without the getting hit part of it that I think there's some of that Ant is trying to save here. There needs to be, I was just thinking about this morning. Ant needs to be able to do something from the mid range. And we know that his shot effectiveness from the mid range hasn't been great this season or for his career. So it becomes one of those things. It's like, okay, can you get to a floater? Can we get to a lob here? Those are the things that if I see that in the final 12 games of the season, in addition to the 3-point shooting, in addition to getting to the line, and then I'm scared if I'm an opponent playing the Wolves in the playoffs, because now I don't know what the way is to slow Anthony Edwards down. But there's got to be something other than the haymaker threes and the kamikaze drives to the rim, because as great as he is at both of those things, once you put him in a 35% usage, he needs a little bit more. Or if he's not finishing at the basket in that game, he needs something else. If he's shooting 1 for 11 from 3 in that game, he needs something else. And this is nitpicking a star player, but like if he had that last night, they win the game, even despite shooting 1 for 11.
Do you feel, this is not a rhetorical question, I really don't know, McDaniels and Randall in the first half had stat line, eye test, and numbers eerily reminiscent of their struggles at the beginning of the season. McDaniel couldn't figure out his way into the game, got some early foul trouble in addition to that, wasn't on the boards at all. I don't think he had a rebound in the first half. And Randall was holding the ball a lot and trying to bully his way into points and doing the old draw two kick out rather than preemptively move the ball. I think some of that had to do with they were sluggish and they reverted to old habits. Some of it had to do with the fact that Indiana was playing so hard that they just their mental sluggishness enabled them to just fall back into what they thought was an easy counter, which wasn't an easy counter. But I think one of the things that I really noticed in the first half, which was a double digit, I think it was like 12 or 11, they were up at the half, the Pacers, was that McDaniels and Randall were very, very ineffective in ways that we've seen before.
Yeah, I do think it was sluggishness. I mean, just kind of, haven't been around the team a lot recently. There's a lot of, they're tired right now. I don't mean that as like an excuse. It's just like that is
right.
They're saying that to us,
Right.
And I think like we can connect the dots of the sluggishness. A little less tired, okay, a little less body movement in the half court. Certainly last night, less hustle to get back on defense and stop the ball. And I think just what we know with this team, when they do play sluggish and do not have that physical activity to their game, it does look like the beginning of the season. And because that's how they played at the beginning of the season. And when they play that way, that's often what Jaden McDaniels' stat line is going to look like, or Julius Randle's is going to look like. And again, if we connect, I think the encouraging thing is I would not expect the Wolves to ever be sluggish in a playoff game. So is that encouraging? Yes. But like it's 12 more games this season. They're still tired right now, and they probably need to win 9 or 10 of them to get into a seed where they really feel like they can do something in the playoffs. So I think the fatigue and sluggishness element is a right now thing that they do need to overcome, even if we give them the grace of assuming that to be there in the playoffs. So that makes sense.
Okay, and so then we revisit the age-old topic, which I'm usually tired of talking about, but is relevant here. If they are a tired team and you just extend the bench to more minutes for Clark and some for Shannon, you take away minutes from people who are playing very well but are tired. And, what does that look like? Do you want to keep momentum with your 8 or 9 that at most are going to be playing in the playoffs, or do you want to win some games and perhaps keep that, bench momentum that you had by putting more minutes in? Last night, only in hindsight, because I thought about Shannon going in numerous times, and I began to think the way this game is being reffed and the way Indiana is playing, he will either be really good or really bad in this game. He will either get a lot of fouls or get, discontinued in the way he goes to the hoop. I mean, I don't know how it would have panned out, but I don't think it was a safe floor play. I don't think that he might have made a big difference, but he might have turned that 8-point deficit into 15 in a hurry. Which he actually did the previous game where he's like minus 13 in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was 8 pretty much last night with a little bit of Jalen Clark, but it was 7 then in the second half because Rudy Gobert was ejected. Jalen Clark played 5 minutes in the second half and didn't play in overtime. So I've largely been more on play the 8 guys than I have been on play the young guy. Just like not all the way across the board all season, but generally there. But this is the case, and I would have seen the logic in it is a back-to-back of going a little bit deeper to fight some of that pretty obvious sluggishness that the team had. But it's also I get it. It's a close game where you're down and you're Finch and you're like, all right, do I want to go with 8 more minutes of Terrence Shannon here in lieu of Julius Randle? Like it's a lot easier to say that it should have happened.
Agree. Exactly. And that's my thinking too.
Mhm.
But just hearing you talk a little bit and remembering back, he says he trusts Clark implicitly. I think you could have given 5 to 6 more minutes of Clark out there, because he's kind of the counterpart to what some of those Indiana players were playing like,
Yes. Well, I want to talk about the defense in particular, and I thought that was a huge subplot of the game, was Indiana racing the ball up the floor, and Jalen Clark in particular could have been a full court maybe antidote to that in ways, and was when he was out there. Let me grab our second break here, though. Let y'all know that today's show is brought to you by Factor Meals. I've been telling you about Factor here consistently for the past few weeks. It really is a fast and easy and healthy way to be having food at home that you do not need to completely cook yourself. It's these meal packages that come refrigerated, again, dietitian approved, and they're ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes. And if you're just feeling like one of those times in life where you're like, oh my gosh, it's the grocery shopping or the time to cook is just a little overwhelming for this period of time, you can boost your Factor package up to having more meals delivered over that time. That's nice. I've scaled mine to 5 meals a week or 2, or you can go every meal that way as well. I really do think there's a nice balance to be found with that. You too can eat smart with Factor, and you can get started with at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast. Use code Factor Podcast. You'll get 50% off your first box plus shipping. Again, that's code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Today's show is also brought to you by Skims. And Skims men's underwear is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA basketball. And they're trying to, get the word out about what Skims has to offer specifically in the men's department. As I've been telling you all here, I really do think it's a good thing to add to your workout bag. We buy a lot of workout shirts or shorts or joggers or whatever it might be. But I really do think like these compression type boxer briefs that they have are a part of your workout gear as well. I wear mine when I go running, but also I wear, another pair to work or when I'm sitting on the couch, because they are comfortable. As you have with your workout clothes, you end up finding yourself wearing them just in day-to-day life because they can end up being some of your most comfortable clothing. So if you'd like to try out Skims and get a pair for yourself, you can shop Skims Men's at skims.com or in Skims stores. If you do purchase online, let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Again, Skims is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA basketball. Britt, I think the biggest 4-quarter, or if we include the overtime, 4.5-quarter theme of that game, broadly related to the entirety of the game, was Indiana's pace and just sprint dribbling it up the floor. I mean, I know sitting next to you during the game has driven me crazy the entire time. And I'm saying, they're not matched up. They're not matched up. Right. They're not stopping the ball. And Dante's pointing at Nikhil, is pointing at Nas of who do you got here? And it was just the exact chaos that a shorthanded Indiana team was trying to foster in that game. They play that way at full strength. So it's not surprising that they're good at it, right? Even their second unit, but I don't know. I mean, if I'm a scout going against the Wolves, watching their last 15 games of the regular season or whatever, preparing for the playoffs, I'm noting that game and I'm saying, hey, opportunistically, if not with a permanence, let's run on this team. Let's get that defense scrambling, because this Wolves defense, when they are set in the half court, is back to being close to what it was a season ago. When they're scrambling, playing against semi-transition, not matched up on who it is or who their guy is or a guy is, these 3-point shooters get loose and they're open enough to be able to take shots or have straight line drives against a non-set defense. I thought that was the most concerning global element of that game last night.
Yeah. I think Naz Reid is a problem in transition defense. And I thought that, Ant obviously comes and goes with it depending on, where he has been in the offensive play coming on. McDaniels, when he's in foul trouble, is a different defender in transition, I think, as he was last night. But in general, when I asked Finch about it, kind of stole your question because you were the one that brought it up. But as we were talking about it during the game, I began to notice it more. And again, and I think I said to you, this is like a 3-year-old problem. It isn't like this is new. They have always had a lot of problems just figuring it out. And so I asked Finch, and he really just wasn't into it. He said, I don't really think it's that way. So, but then somebody asked Dante about it, maybe you, and
I got the clip. Let me play maybe that clip right here.
Team's trying to play that fast. What do you need to do defensively against that?
Playing against the team for so long, they're, it's not a knock. They like to play fast one way. So when there's opportunities to run it right back at them, take those opportunities. At the same time as once you get the lead, pick apart the defense, get what we want. And we miss some open looks, but a team like that's just pushing the transition to focus. We have to get back and we have to load up and be ready. All they were doing was punching gaps and passing the ball and shooting wide open threes.
It seemed like a lot of times there was confusion in matching up. Do you guys have a freedom to kind of pick who it is you're guarding there, or is it just so fast?
Everybody on the court can guard anybody. It wasn't like there was somebody out there that we needed somebody to be on the whole time. But they were pushing it so fast that they were just getting downhill, and I think we were maybe trying to match up too much rather than just finding the closest man and staying there. So when they're playing fast, it really doesn't matter who you're guarding. But second half, I think we adjusted pretty well. But we can't have these first halves where we're down 15, down 20.
I struggle with the idea of just matching up with somebody. I think, like, in general, that's like a lack of discipline. I do think this team has enough defensive personnel to just do that, though. Anybody can and should just be able to pick someone up. The problem I had, particularly with the first half, and I think Dante was right, it was better in the second half. They weren't even it just wasn't picking up anybody. It does annoy me where I'm like, oh, why can't Jaden just guard this guy? Because this is the guy that they want. But maybe Indiana wasn't as much that way. Bottom of the line, when they play a team that plays faster, it needs to be taken care of more of. And because they do have such good defensive personnel, they probably don't have to be as sharp as other teams are because, okay, Nikhil's on the wrong guy. Well, Nikhil's probably going to be okay, even on the quote unquote wrong guy. They don't have a real weak spot other than maybe Conley of the rotation guys there. But anyways, your thoughts there.
I would push back a little on the idea that they have a lot of guys who can guard 1 through 4. And I would think that it's really convenient of Dante to be able to say that because he may be like top 2 on the roster in terms of being able to guard a point guard and a power forward. Mm-hmm. We've seen him block shots on power forwards like 3 games in a row or something. And also he battles in the post. You are right that on the perimeter, somebody like Nikhil or, I do think, again, it was an interesting answer from Dante because the first thing he did is, all right, we can do to them what they do to us. Well, who benefits from that? Dante in a transition pull-up 3, that's his bread and butter, coming down and just burying a 3 before the other team gets set.
Right.
But that wasn't happening last night. And that, again, some of what we're talking about here is basketball is so integrated and the Wolves didn't have things that they've just kind of almost taken for granted in this 8-game winning streak. They've been hitting threes at a remarkable clip. They've been sharing the ball naturally. They have not had defenses look quite so frantic and aggressive in terms of trying to, 1, deny them things, and 2, getting the ball up the court in such a weird, haphazard way. And it gets to the whole Ant thing that we make fun of sometimes. There is no go-to guy, so you don't know how to prioritize your matchups. But that is, I mean, Mathurin, Mathurin was, you know, probably their go-to guy for quite a while there and Nebhart before, but they didn't have their top 4 scorers. So there you go. Or their playmaker, the guy, Cal Halbert, is usually the guy that, as much as any team, regulates flow, even in that kind of free-flowing Indiana system. So
they just sprinted it up. That was the no Halliburton plan. Sprint.
It was every NBA game obviously takes on its own personality. This one was a weird game in that Indiana chose, even though they rested 2 of their starters weren't even hurt. They were resting. They chose to win this game anyway from the beginning. And it's an 82-game season. It's a grind. And the Wolves went into that game thinking that 3/4 of an effort would do it. And they held that opinion until they lost.
Yeah. Not specific to last night, but specific to this new iteration of the team with everybody back. Are the Wolves better at offense or defense right now?
I think recency bias would make me say offense, but if I take a really hard look, it's because I saw a phenomenal defense last year, and they're not phenomenal this year, but they're still pretty damn good on defense. And whereas last year and much of this year, when they're not doing their usual things of terrible shot selection, turning it over, the brain farts that have characterized Wolves offense for quite some time, when they're not doing that, it's easy to say this defense is carrying this team. I think this offense is carrying this team. I think that what is more correct way to say it is this offense is taking some of the burden off of this defense. I think if you have Rudy Gobert in the lineup and you have the team playing on a string the way it has been playing lately, I would still say that they're a slightly better defensive team than they are offense. But I do think the balance is the best it's been since the first season, since the Pat Bev Vando year.
Yeah, I think the defense is more reliable than the offense is. I think the offense is more potent. Like it can really kill you, like it could kill the opponent.
Yep.
And I do think that's the difference between the defense last year. The defense was also potent last year. And we would see that in clutch time and fourth quarters and stuff at just a different level of killing the opponent. They don't as often have that potency to it, but I think this offense is more potent. But yeah, it's interesting to think whether it's from an identity standpoint or whatever. I think we're getting close to saying that the answer to that would be offense, but I do still think the answer is defense, particularly if Gobert's still relatively new back as he further integrates and starts feeling himself a little bit more within that. Maybe he can bring back some of the defensive potency. But yeah, I mean, last night was not a good defensive game. There's been, even during the win streak, a handful of we're just going to outscore you games, which is, I think, bringing the two closer, the two sides of the ball closer together. And the numbers say that too.
And I would agree with you, but to reinforce my point that I think we've been spoiled somewhat, the Wolves had 30 points off turnovers last night. I mean, that's not bad defense. If you can get 30 points off, and your argument could be, well, they have an offense now that's capable of exploiting turnovers, but still to be able to get 30 points off turnovers is a sign of a good defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the defense is good, it is that. I don't think that was the defense being good, forcing close. I think the turnovers, I mean, if you look at the turnovers, there's a lot of just Indiana not having good players playing there too. But yeah, they certainly forced a lot of turnover. I mean, part of it's having overtime there to get a couple more, whatever. I don't know. I can't give them any positive defensive grades from last night's game. I don't know. I mean, not that it was a 0, but
Right.
yeah, I struggle with the defense, mostly just from a pattern recognition standpoint. It was the same thing. It was the same thing.
Well, I mean, it does blend in, right? I mean, it is the situation where one of the reasons that Indiana was able to run so much is because the Wolves were terrible from the field, especially in the first half. I mean, when they shot like 22% from 3-point territory in the first half. Well, that's a lot of long rebounds. And the team is getting out and running anyway. There is that. I love that, Finch doesn't say this anymore, but I've never forgotten that in-between state where there's like there's a purgatory between when an offensive possession and a defensive possession.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. And Vando used to be like and Jalen Clark has taken that mantle. Right. It starts, the offensive possession starts when you have the ball. And and so I do think that being able to be thorough in the margins is not something this team does as well as it has in the past, snuffing teams. But I also think that when the offense is missing shots, again, and also if you remember, there was a period of time where Indiana just destroyed them on the boards.
Yeah,
they got a lot of offensive rebounds and therefore a lot of offensive putbacks. And again, that's bad defense, but that's bad defense in a way that, is different than what we're talking about, getting beaten in transition.
Yeah. I mean, those are the ways this team most gets hurt defensively, right? When they're functioning is giving up offensive rebounds or turning the ball over on offense, forcing you to, when you turn the ball over, you're probably not getting back into your set defense,
right?
On the other side of the floor.
And that was for people who, want to know McDaniel's hidden value. Nas and Randall, when they play next to McDaniel's, have gotten used to the fact that he gets a lot of rebounds.
Yeah, sure.
And that especially on the defensive glass. And I think one of the things that happened last night was that Indiana just owned the boards on, when McDaniel sat with foul trouble in that first half.
Let me grab one more break here, and then I want to talk about your Tim Connelly feature. Right. Today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino, and Kyle and I will be hosting a watch party at Treasure Island on April 5th for the Wolves-Sixers game. Oftentimes when Britt and I have done live shows in the past, it's like on and off night, and you're just coming there to listen to us talk. You could come and listen to us talk. We're going to do the live show from 5 to 6 p.m., but then the game is at 6 p.m. Kyle and I and Cooper will hang out afterwards to watch the game with as many of you who are there for that. So we would love if you would put that on your radar, but also have Treasure Island in your mind as a place to go to watch March Madness as well. They have the Parlay Lounge where we do these live shows. It would be a great place. It's got kind of a surrounding bar, all these TVs, a huge projection drop down screen that you can see if you're watching here on YouTube. So April 5th with Kyle and I, live show at 5:00, game at 6 p.m. there. Come hang out for the night or for the weekend. And then also head down there for March Madness as well. Today's show is also brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company. You saw Steve Little and his wife were both on the screen. Steve, you might recognize from the ads on here. He popped up on the broadcast with him and his wife after Ant was doing his celebration after that game. Your Home Improvement Company has been a longtime sponsor for us here, and I know a handful of you have got home improvement needs taken care of with them. As the spring comes around, you're going to be thinking about, okay, house needs X, Y, Z. And we would love if you would contact Your Home Improvement Company to see if they're the right fit for you. You can do that by calling 866-777-YHIC, or you can just check them out at yourhomeimprovementco.com. They have buy 2, get 2 windows free as a triple pane windows going on as a deal right now. And then their bathroom renovations are still 30% off. That could be a simple tub to shower conversion, or it can be a full on bathroom renovation. Your home improvement company also offers great financing deals that require 0 money down, 0 interest, and 0 payments until 2026. Again, contact your home improvement company by calling 866-777-YHIC or by going to yourhomeimprovement.co.com. Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better. Do you have any final thoughts on that game? I would like to talk a little bit about the Connelly piece because I really like it.
No, I think, I think we've exhausted it, especially probably people are sick of that game anyway. I consider it an aberration. I think you're smart to point out the ways in which it could be a harbinger of how teams may want to attack the Wolves in the playoffs. I think that's a good angle to take because Rick Carlisle is a really smart coach. I think they're a really well-coached team in general. The assistants, whatever, you can tell it's Dagnall's the same thing in OKC, where your roster, if you go down the roster, you don't lose fundamentals. You don't have guys who have checked out just because of the 8th man or the 9th or 10th man. And I do think that if you run into that type of disciplined team, Udoka's Rockets feel that way to me, that, whoever the playoff opponent is, you might have teams that will get in situations where if they do want to lengthen the bench, a good way to make those players more effective is to deploy kind of a similar strategy to what the Pacers did. So I thought it was a good angle to take. But other than that, no, I'm
done. So you wrote this big Tim Connelly feature for MSP Mag. And I've been kind of talking. You worked on it in the summer. It's magazine, so it came out here. But just kind of, just talk about the project a little bit. I mean, it was I put it in the show notes just for listeners right here. It's like linked down there where you see the advertise. It says Britt's column. Click on it. I mean, this is. I said this to you when we were eating last night. I mean, for me, I love reading John and Chris and Jace and you, but 95% of the time when I'm reading what you guys are writing and the quotes that you guys are getting, I was there and I heard those quotes myself too. This was completely new information on Tim Connelly. And just the kind of rare story that we don't get that much over the course of the season. So I really would recommend reading it. You're going to just want to read this if you're a listener and you care about this. We don't talk to Tim Connelly very often. We don't get that much background information on, but just tell me about the project a little bit.
Well, I wanted to do it. Obviously, he had a fantastic season. When I proposed the story to Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine in July, they were a month removed from going to the Western Conference Finals. And so Connelly was kind of on top of the world, and I hadn't seen anything really comprehensive on him. And so I said, I approached him, I think it was during the press conference after the draft or something, and basically said, hey, I'm doing a story on you, whatever. I said, I want to talk to your father, classic Connelly fashion. He goes, you and my father will get along great, Well, which indicated, all right, well, things are going to go well here. And they did not. I asked the Wolves communication department, what to do. And they said, send us a kind of a detailed, what are you going to do? Send them a long thing. And the team was in Summer League. I did not go to Summer League. I figured I would get them after Summer League. And what happened is that everybody in Wolves management pretty much said, all right, we have had a shorter than expected offseason, and we're going to spend it with our families. I'm sure the message went out to the Wolves media department, do not, no interviews or whatever. But I wasn't told that directly. Instead, it was kind of like, hey, I'll get back to you, so on and so forth. Long story short, I spent most of my summer waiting, thinking this was going to be the 2-week period when I was going to get, greenlit for an interview. In the meantime, I talked to a couple of people and kept on trying to search things out.
Well, I mean, that element of it is awesome, you guys. I mean, like Masai Ujiri's quoted in this, who obviously Tim worked with in Denver. Adam Simon, GM of the Heat. I mean, you talked to a lot of different people.
A lot of it, and the piece is entitled Scout's Honor because Tim Connelly's identity is totally bound up with his 10 years spent with the Washington Wizards organization as a scout and with other organizations. But it started like when he just was 19 or 20 years old as an intern going up and down the East Coast for the Washington Wizards, scouting high school and local college talent in his granduncle's beat up Nissan, and
Nissan Stanza, right?
Nissan Stanza, right? A maroon Nissan Stanza. And so anyway, it got to the point where I had the story ready, going to be done at the end of August. I still hadn't gotten a commitment for an interview and started to act more and more like a jerk so they'd notice me and say, hey, this got to happen. Finally happened, turned in the copy in late September, found out that Minneapolis St. Paul's sister publication, Minneapolis Business Journal, was going to name Tim Connelly its Business Executive of the Year for the December issue, which effectively meant that the piece would be held until February because they didn't want it to come out the month before this happened, and they didn't want it to come out the month after this happened.
Right. Okay, tell me about the story. Tell me about what you wrote about it. I get you saying it came out too late, and it was the Wolves.
Well, so yeah, okay. I just had to get that off my chest.
Yeah.
The story is about the fact that he is a relationship freak. He is somebody who is kind of like a social savant. He was voted the shyest kid in his high school class, and kind of
what an embarrassing award to win.
Yeah. Well,
Not
I mean, it may have been tongue in cheek, but it's still it is the kind of thing you do mention. He and his brothers all played basketball. It was a very basketball heavy Baltimore. In the city of Baltimore is very, very much a hoops hotbed. He was addicted to the game. His brothers were addicted to the game. There's 7 people in his family. In the first early years of his life, they lived in this small house when 6 of them were still born, were born. And his father moved up the ladder and it got to the point where they moved in a really nice house in a better urban neighborhood. Ogden Nash, the poet, owned the place and everything. And so he had this difference of being kind of growing up in semi-poverty, but in a tight-knit family, and then having some affluence, but having these values and having this game. And because he was totally immersed in basketball, having a really diverse set of friends, and loved basketball, got into it, and became a scout. And these scouts, Adam Simon says, I grew up in Miami. Most of my friends were lifelong friends. I introduced Tim to these people, and I'm not even in town anymore. I'm finding out that he's down there going to these weddings with them and socializing. And he says, how when you have a first conversation with somebody and you meet them again, you struggle to figure out what you said, who they were. He said, Tim remembers everything about that. Yeah. And he immediately is back on the same page. So there is that aspect. And it gets to the point where people say Tim's wife lets Tim be Tim. When I asked that about him, he goes, yeah, well, sometimes that's a little obnoxious. And so we pursued that a little bit. And he said, well, if it was up to me, I'd have people over to my house every night. He's got 3 kids. And, and one time he invited his friend to go along a last minute on this trip to the Philippines. And the guy came. And
with his family, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just all these crazy things. His father, Tim was going to get married, and his father asked about rehearsal dinner and everything, and Tim said, we'll just get pizza or something. And then 2 weeks before the thing, he goes to his father and says, hey, what are we going to do about rehearsal dinner? So his father scrambles and gets a really nice place in D.C., and says to Tim, invite whoever you want, whoever you need. Well, over 100 people show up to this rehearsal dinner, and the father doesn't know most of them. The guy is just a relationship guy. He functions in relationships. Josh Kroenke, his boss or his, the guy above him, in the ownership group in Denver. He says he still talks to him on a weekly basis. Mike Honori said that when he was, he moved from Denver to another team, Tim would continually check in on him. He's just somebody who keeps tabs on everybody and likes to just be that way. Right. And that instills a lot of, he's a real character-oriented guy, as everybody knows. He drafts for character as much as anything. Character is as important to him in many respects as talent, the fit of somebody. And some of that is the fact that not only is he a really good scout of talent, but he's become a really good scout of character and how people mesh. So
I asked just because I read it, and then I asked Finch about it pregame of kind of how this relationship element is relevant to this season. I know you weren't there. I want to play that for the listeners, but also for you as well.
Ask you about Tim Connelly, and you said to us before, you guys talk like every day, but I'm curious how he's helped over the course of this season in ways that you can share, just kind of keeping the ship moving in one direction all year.
Yeah, I think he certainly has a ton of strengths, but we all know he's an outstanding people person, outstanding connector and communicator. He's always communicating with the guys. I trust him implicitly. He knows the messages that I'm trying to send. I think he sends the right ones that support that or can reframe that in a way maybe the players need to kind of also digest it. I think they enjoy that. They trust him. They all know that we ultimately want the best for them. So he's been instrumental at times just with different guys throughout the season, like maybe a little too worried about themselves, and he can help nudge them back to the pack. That's just normal dynamics that goes on, but he's outstanding at it.
I thought that,
that's a cool answer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that is true. I mean, Finch and Connelly have been a united front from the beginning. I was concerned about that because I was a big Finch guy when Connelly came in, and then Connelly felt like a creation of Laurie and A-Rod, being minority owner, new guys in town wanting to make a big splash. And I did remember that Finch was in, I think it was Denver or was it Denver or New Orleans? Anyway, he was with Connelly for 1 year, and then he left. And so I was wondering about that. But Finch told me that it didn't have anything to do with that necessarily. It wasn't, animosity necessarily, just an opportunity to go someplace better in terms of his job prospects. And what I have seen from the two of them, I mean, there wasn't a lot of distance on the Rudy Gobert thing. They held tough and they made it work. We know that the Randall thing, we know that the Dillingham thing, these are things that they could be. The way Tim Connelly gushed about Rob Dillingham and the way Finch has subsequently used him, you would think there might be a rift there. The way that the trade was made, I would imagine to open up future time for Nas, but Finch's reliance on furthering Connelly, there might be a way for that to be a rift. I haven't seen any of that type of thing between those guys. And I think that unity permeates through the coaching staff and the team. Finch is a relationship guy who runs a great locker room, but Connelly is a relationship guy too. And I think that is what they both have in common. And that's why that kind of common purpose is why, if they do have any disagreements, it is not something that ever gets in the way of the common purpose of making this team run on an even keel. And it's been an even keel team. I mean, even when Rudy Gobert is punching Kyle Anderson, it felt like an even keel team, weirdly enough, Right. So it's just, I do think that the Connelly-Finch relationship is a strength. I mean, I've seen a lot of dysfunction on a lot of Wolves management teams over my course in time, beginning with Musselman and Billy McKinney and Bob Stein to begin it with. Muss wanted to win every game, and these guys wanted to develop people. And, right on through Bill Blair and Flippin McHale, or, Kurt Rambis and David Kahn.
Literally all of them.
Just I could go through, the Randy Whitman series. We don't have enough time. But, this is by far the most cohesive and proactively synergistic partnership between the guys on the sidelines who run the chalkboard and the guys in upstairs running the personnel. And so it's a strength for this team.
Did anything get left on the cutting room floor of your story?
Yeah, actually, a really interesting, I think, Tim Connelly still plays a lot of basketball, a lot of pickup basketball, even though he's not very good at it. But he just loves the camaraderie, and being able to do what he wants is one of the things that he has a priority about. We connected in one of the few ways we were able to connect. I think, when you have a writer doing a profile of a guy, but I could really relate to the idea that, for him, it's more about freedom of movement and doing things. And so when we were talking about things, he likes goofy comedies. He likes Dumb and Dumber, that kind of stuff. Adam Sandler is like his hero. And it's because Adam Sandler loves to play basketball all day long and do what he wants and hang out and be with. Adam Sandler famously has a ton of friends and a ton of connections in the industry. And there really is kind of a comp between Connelly's role in the NBA and Adam Sandler's role in like motion picturedom or, Hollywood stardom, whatever you want to call it, in that there is this levity and irreverence. Connelly frequently says, lottery balls determine my future as much as anything I do, or, just that whole kind of attitude about things.
Yeah.
So,
well, and Adam Sandler played a scout in a movie with Anthony Edwards. The connections are thick there.
Right. So that was probably the biggest takeoff. And otherwise it was just listening to people, the scouts who he grew up with, they all went to Europe. They would buy their VHS, tapes from a guy from Bologna, Italy for cash, all from the same places. They shared cabs. They shared airplanes. They would be in Zagreb one day and Brno, Czechoslovakia the next. And
crazy.
Having that, just looking at people that back then, like the 90s or whatever, there wasn't a lot of really good footage of some of these European guys. Right. And so, they'd go over there and look at it. In the meantime, times have been, with Tim Connelly, it's gotten to the point where I need an itinerary, but he loosens me up, and it's gotten to the point where if he calls, my wife just says, go, because she understands that he's in good hands. And so there's just a lot of love and affection among the scouting community for Connelly. And I think it bears noting that Dell Demps is the one that took him from being a scout to the front office when he was the GM or POBO of New Orleans. And Matt Lloyd was one of the guys he grew up with in the scouting fraternity. And the first two hires Tim Connelly made were Matt Lloyd and Dell Demps, who remain guys that would take a bullet for him, in a second. And throughout the scouting, you mentioned Adam Simon, who is assistant general manager of the Heat, and Masai Ujiri, who's the POBO of Toronto Raptors. There are guys all over the league who just, in the scouting fraternity, who just love this guy.
Yeah, I swear by him. It was, that's why the story was good. I mean, we knew that or had heard that, right, about Tim for the years that, you and I have been covering him, or the fans have been watching him. But it was really cool to put some specific details to Tim's story. And it's a long one, so there's a lot more in there than Britt we even shared on here. You can check that out at mspmag.com. Again, it's in the show notes right here. If you're watching on YouTube or on the podcast version, you can just click on the link there. Maybe I'll tweet it out later this afternoon as well. But it's just like one of those stories that comes out over the course of the season where you go, oh yeah, that one's I don't want to forget to read, that one, or it becomes a for me, a story that you kind of remember over the course of the season. I thought it was great. I appreciate you doing this after a back-to-back, and it was we got a lot of pods after wins, and this one was different, but keep moving.
Absolutely. And what we got, 10 left?
12.
11, 12? Okay.
Yeah, I think they're 40 and 30. They're a couple games ahead of everybody else.
6 are they now? 6 and 6, 6 home, 6 away. I think
that sounds about.
I think they have a 5-game road trip just before they come home and play 2 teams they should beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they have on the next 2 they should win for sure. Pelicans, and they'll play the Pacers again.
But Zion's
rematch. Yeah, they lost by 46 to the Pistons yesterday. If you've watched the Pelicans are like one of those teams who seem like personnel-wise, like the talent, they should be better. But Trey Murphy got shut down for the season. He's probably their second best player.
Right.
It should be 2 very cake games, and certainly 2 games to wrap it full circle. Right. That this game is obviously more important to the Wolves than it is the Pelicans. But you got to play the games, and they got to win the games, because again, this is I think to get the seeding that they want, they're going to need to go 9-3, 10-2, 11-1. I mean, it's at that point, or you're going to be in the play-in, and you're going to have to work your way through that way, which is
it's one of
not as ideal.
2 and done if you're 7 or 8, but still, that's 2 and done is not a great position to be in.
Right. Sorry, my microphone got cut out here at the end, just for listeners if my sounds bad right now. I've played with some things while Britt was talking there. Next up with the pod, we had Britt and Chris kind of switch spots this week. Chris had the night off last night, so grab Britt for this Pacers game. But Chris and I will recap the Pelicans game on Thursday. The Pelicans game on Wednesday night. We'll do that on Thursday morning, and then we'll keep moving from there. Again, you can check out Britt's piece at MSP Mag, and follow him on Twitter, of course, or Blue Sky as well. And until Thursday with Chris, he's Britt. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Grinning hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.